Okay, let's just dive right in. The U.S. national debt. It's a number so big, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around it. $33 trillion. So what if we could just wipe it clean? We're going to explore a couple of pretty radical what-ifs based on the real data, and we'll start with a very old idea, gold.
All right, first things first. We're talking about a $33 trillion problem. So before we can even begin to talk about solutions, you got to understand the sheer scale of the hole we're in.
Yep, there it is. $33 trillion. That's a 33 with 12 zeros after it. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's a number that just keeps on growing, right? Which leads to this massive, simple question. Is there any easy way out of this?
And that brings us to a really popular idea you hear all the time. What about all that gold the U.S. is supposedly hoarding in places like Fort Knox? Could America's legendary gold reserves solve this massive debt problem? It sounds simple enough, right? Well, let's actually run the numbers.
Okay, so to figure this out, we have to know what all that gold is actually worth. And this is where it gets pretty interesting. Turns out there are two completely different ways to value it. And one of them, well, it's basically a relic from the past.
Just look at this. The difference is insane. You've got the official book value, which is stuck way back in 1973. By that measure, the entire stockpile is worth a measly $11 billion. But then you have the market value, what those 8,133 metric tons are worth if you sold them today. And that's a whole lot closer to $1 trillion.
So, let's be clear. If the U.S. were to actually sell its gold, that $1 trillion number is the only one that really matters. Yeah, the Fed has this weird bookkeeping claim, but the gold itself, that belongs to the Treasury. So, $1 trillion, that's our number. Now let's see how it stacks up.
Okay, $1 trillion. I mean, that sounds like an unbelievable amount of money, right? But is it enough? Let's put it right up against that $33 trillion debt. Is this the silver bullet, or is it just a drop in the bucket?
And hey, it's not just gold. The U.S. also has some foreign currency kicking around. About $40 billion worth of euros, yen, that kind of thing. So when you add it all up, the grand total of these so-called hard assets comes to just a little over $1 trillion.
And this chart, wow, this really just lays it all out, doesn't it? You see that tiny little bar on the left? That's our $1 trillion in assets. And that monster on the right, yeah, that's the $33 trillion in debt. It's not even a fair fight. Our assets are just completely dwarfed.
So let's put a final number on this. If you sold every single ounce of gold, cashed in all the foreign currency, you'd only cover about 3% of the debt. 3%! It barely even makes a dent. So that whole idea of paying off the debt with gold, yeah, sadly, it's just a myth. All right, so if selling our assets is a non-starter, what's next? This leads us to a much, much more radical and frankly dangerous thought experiment. What if the government just printed the money to pay it all off? It's a path some countries have actually tried, and believe me, you need to understand just how devastating the consequences can be.
This is what people call the inflate away the debt scenario. The government, literally, just fires up the printing presses, or, the digital version of that today, and just creates money out of thin air to pay its bills. Instead of making tough choices on taxes or spending, they just hit print. And spoiler alert, the outcome is always, always a catastrophe.
And this disaster has a name: hyperinflation. And listen, this isn't your normal everyday inflation we've all been dealing with. No, this is a complete, total meltdown in the value of a currency. We've seen it happen time and time again throughout history. Think Weimar Germany in the 1920s or Zimbabwe more recently. And the result is always the same: total devastation for regular people.
So what would that look like here? Well, it'd be like a horrifying domino effect. First, the money supply just explodes as trillions of new dollars flood the system. Right after that, the value of everyone's savings, your bank account, your retirement funds, it all gets wiped out. Poof. Then prices for everything, food, gas, rent, they just skyrocket into the stratosphere. The result? Widespread hardship, which could easily lead to social and political chaos. I mean, it would fundamentally break the country from the inside.
And you better believe that internal chaos wouldn't stay internal. It would send massive shockwaves around the entire planet and completely rewrite America's role in the world.
In a world like this, the U.S. would probably still be a military superpower, right? It still has the tech, it still has the nukes, but its economic power? Gone. Collapsed. And the trust the world had in the U.S.? Totally destroyed. And that creates this huge power vacuum. And who's waiting to fill it?
Rivals like China. Even though their own holdings of U.S. debt would be worthless, the opportunity would be massive for them. So what's the most immediate consequence? A super weak, hyperinflated dollar would basically put a giant for sale sign on the entire country. Other nations, with their now much stronger currencies, could just swoop in and buy up huge chunks of the American economy. We're talking companies, farmland, infrastructure, for pennies on the dollar.
And what about all those countries that loaned America money for decades? Places like Japan, the UK, China. The trust would be completely shattered. As one source put it, those past creditors would be burned for a century. You can forget about anyone wanting to lend the U.S. money for generations.
So this all leaves us in a pretty stark place, doesn't it? If selling off our assets is just a drop in the bucket, and printing money is basically a national suicide mission, what's left? The easy answers, as we've just seen, they just don't exist, which suggests the only real solutions involve much, much harder choices. Choices about what we spend, who we tax, and what we really want from our government. And frankly, that's a conversation that's a lot tougher than just digging for gold.